You got the video going. Do you have a family history of cancer?
Oh yes.
Actually, he wrote down quite an extensive list of it.
Okay.
Yeah, I made like a family tree diagram and put down, first I wrote down the names and the type of cancers, and then I made a family tree from my grandparents to my parents and my uncles, and then my first cousins. Finds out that I had 7 first cousins that have cancer. And some of them died from it.
I'm gonna listen to you here for a second. Okay, let's have you sit there. Deep breath. In and out. Okay. Look in your eyes here. Okay, open your mouth real wide. No sores in your mouth or anything like that. Okay, I'm gonna have you lie back here for a second. And your bowel's moving through okay,
Oh yeah.
and you're breathing okay.
Well, until today, I mean, he was having stomach issues today, but I mean, that may have been the chili.
I'm just gonna push around your belly a little bit, and you're peeing okay.
Abnormally okay.
Like too much?
Because of the diabetes, I pee like every 10 minutes. It doesn't make for a very restful sleep.
Does it hurt up here when I'm pushing?
No.
Your spleen isn't gigantic. I can just barely feel the tip, so that's good. I saw it on the CT scan they did. And your legs haven't been swelling a whole bunch.
No.
And you said no fevers.
No fever, just sweating like right now.
Okay, I'm gonna push this in.
In the night sweats. I can't put blankets or even a sheet on. I have to have the ceiling fan going.
All right, so did your mom have cancer?
It's better if I show you a diagram.
Okay.
Now here's my grandparents. I'm not sure, they didn't have cancer, as far as I know. This is my mom and her siblings. My 2 uncles, Ron and Don, they both died, and their information is here. He died of pancreatic cancer just in the last year.
Okay.
And so did his brother 2 months later.
Were they twins?
No. I think they were a year apart.
Okay.
And my Uncle Don, his brother, died of bone and prostate cancer.
And David.
Yeah, well, down here are my uncle and aunts and my parents' children. Charles, which I think I probably have that chronic myeloid hematoma, or leukemia. My sister Mary, she had colon cancer or rectal cancer. And just recently, my aunt's children, Jack and James, they died of cancer. It's on my cell phone with my sister just sent me. My cousin David, he has multiple myeloma. He's still alive. My cousin Kim, she had breast cancer and removal. And my cousin Greg, he died of pancreatic cancer.
But your mom and dad, no cancer in those.
Well, my mom is
I'm
right
sorry,
here.
your mom's there.
No, she did not have cancer. and my dad didn't. My dad died of a heart attack when he was 53, and I was 12. But there was something in the family. My cousin Kim, she had breast cancer, and she was tested positive for the what's it called, the BR.
The BRCA.
Yeah, BRCA2, and she had breast cancer, and then her sister, she was tested positive as well, but she had a preventive breast removal.
Okay.
And then her brother Steve was tested positive. So because of that, this family, Kim, this is my Uncle Ron, his wife Kay, the mother, was tested negative. So it had to come from my Uncle Ron. Now.
And your Uncle Ron is your mom's brother.
Yes. So since I have a 10-year-old child, I would like to see if I can get tested for that one gene to see if I have that.
So in order for you to have it, your mom would have to carry it.
Yeah.
And your mom's been okay so far. Is she still alive?
No, she died in '93.
Yeah, how did she pass away?
She had multiple sclerosis, and she died, I think, of a heart attack.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to look in to see if we can get this testing done. And then, so who had this?
Oh, yeah, this is my cousin's right here, my mom's sister's children. They were actually in their 70s when they died. And one of them had this
Mature syndrome?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, that's quite the history.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
Well, that's always been Dad.
So my main
He's
concern
the
is,
researcher.
my main concern as far as me is, and actually my sibling, sister, well, my sister Ina and my sister Mary, my sister Mary had colon cancer, and she's still battling surgeries, like 13 surgeries now. And my sister Ina and my sister Mary both tested negative for that gene.
So two of your sisters were negative.
Yes.
But none of your sisters, one of them hasn't been tested.
No, both sisters were tested for that gene, and they were both negative.
All right, so you're the only one that's not been tested then?
Correct.
Okay. All right, so in your labs, in your blood you've got 3 different types of cells. You have the white blood cells, the red cells, and the platelets. So when I look at this pattern, I see that your white cell count is pretty elevated. Your red cells look normal. Your platelets are a little bit low. So then the next thing I think about is the type of white blood cells you have. So normally we would have certain white cells that would show up in our peripheral blood, these things called neutrophils and lymphocytes and monocytes. So when we look at yours, we see on that initial, let's use the stuff from October 12th, you had 53% neutrophils, you had 8% bands. Bands are like baby neutrophils. They're immature, a little bit immature cells. You had only 1% lymphocytes. You had 5% atypical lymphocytes, 6% monocytes, 5% eosinophils, 1% basophils, 19% metamyelocytes, and 1% myelocytes, and 1% blasts. That pattern is consistent with CML. Now, I don't know if you have CML yet. We got to figure it out. We got to do the proper tests, which we'll do. I would say this pattern makes me think maybe that's what's going on, but we definitely have not made the diagnosis yet. So Other things can make the white count go up. So there's a condition called myeloproliferative disorder. CML is a myeloproliferative disorder, but there's some other myeloproliferative disorders as well. Things like acute leukemia, which this pattern doesn't look consistent with acute leukemia. Typically, when I see someone with acute leukemia, they're very anemic, and there's some other stuff going on. I don't think that's what this is. There's also something called a leukemoid reaction, where your white count is going up in response to something else going on in your body. One of those things sometimes is an infection, but you don't seem to have any of those symptoms. So I'm thinking so everything's sort of falling into this. This is probably a CML, but we have to do the tests. We have to do the proper testing.
Now, back in July 30th, I went to the urgent care center here in New Bern, and I had a boil in my groin area, which was like the size of a golf ball. And they lanced it, and they did a test, and I had the test results on one of the sheets about the type of bacteria. And that's the last infection. At that time, I did not have any white blood cell count.
You didn't have an elevation then?
Well, that's what it said.
Well, let me see that'd be a good piece of information to know.
I think it's this one.
Yes.
Okay, let's see here. Okay, so no white cells noted on the gram stain. Group G strep. And that boil went away.
It went away, but I still have existing ones that are like pea size.
Okay.
Several of those.
And this was in 7:30. Okay. So those white cells, that was on the little culture they did. It doesn't mean there wasn't any white cells in your body. It just means there wasn't any on that culture. Do you have other laboratory testing from that day?
I don't have that with me, but
that's okay.
I'm not sure if they did take any.
This was your labs.
I asked for my records, and this is what they gave me.
That's what they gave. They might not have taken any blood work.
Yeah. No, not at that time. But they did. My next visit to the urgent care center
just the other labs from his primary care.
was last Monday, a week ago, and this is the lab test from there.
Oh, okay, this is good. All right. Actually, I'm going to have the secretary. I'll give this back to you. I'm going to have the secretary make a photocopy. So you were up then too.
Yeah, that was recent too.
Yeah,
that was
just a week ago.
October.
October 8th. Yeah. Okay. So I think we just need to figure this out. We just need to do the testing to figure it out. And so, CML can often be diagnosed with peripheral blood. So it's a special type of test, and we're going to look for something called the Philadelphia chromosome. But I'm also going to do a test for this thing called the JAK2 mutation that goes along sometimes in people in myeloproliferative disorders. And I'm going to do some other lab tests today as well.
Okay.
This is probably going to take a week or so for it to come back. Okay, so CML is typically, this is disease that used to be fatal. Everyone died when they had it. And the reason is because there's different phases of CML. So people would start off in a phase like this where the white count was elevated, but then it would evolve into an acute leukemia over time. So almost everyone would change into a leukemia, and then that acute leukemia was very difficult to treat. So when we think about these leukemias, there's two big groups, acute and chronic. And so chronic we typically think of as much more treatable. Acute are ones that we got to treat right this second. And so they're more urgent. Okay. So CML it's associated with this what they call a Philadelphia chromosome. And what basically happens is, I think of it like a light switch that gets turned on in these cells, and they decide they're going to start growing too fast. And so one of the scientists, quite a while ago, 20 years ago or so, designed a drug that would go in and turn off the light switch. And that's a very well tolerated drug. But if that light switch isn't turned on, it won't work. So we got to figure out if that light switch is turned on or not, which is what we're going to do with your labs.
So if it doesn't work, then is there another?
There's all kind, yeah.
Okay.
At this point, there's a whole bunch of drugs that could be used.
But we need to find
But-
out a definitive answer first.
Yeah, first we need to figure it out for sure whether that's what it is or not. So if I do this testing and it's wishy-washy and it's not giving us an answer, then we're going to have to do a bone marrow biopsy. But I think if I try to set you up for a bone marrow biopsy now, by the time you get it done, we could have had this initial testing back. So it's just quicker, I think. And if this can make the diagnosis, so we don't have to have a bone marrow biopsy to figure out that it's CML or not. So this will make the diagnosis. But if that test comes back negative, then we're going to have to take a step back, and then you will definitely need a bone marrow biopsy done. But I think we'll just start with the peripheral blood first.
I
Okay.
would agree.
And this is something that evolves over months and months and months. So this isn't something that's going to go crazy in a few days. Okay.
So I read that that Philadelphia chromosome is in 95% of the CML
That's
patients.
right. That's right. And so, so let's say that Philadelphia chromosome came back and it was negative. That's what we do the bone marrow biopsy to have the pathologist look at it under the microscope and see. So it's not 100%, but it's pretty good.
Yeah.
It's pretty good. And I think that might be what this is, but I'm not 100% sure. Your spleen's a little bit big. That goes along with CML. This pattern goes along with CML.
Now the urgent care center, they got CAT scans as well from last Wednesday, and she told me that the only thing that was elevated or enlarged was my liver.
And these guys didn't say anything about your liver. I don't believe.
They said something about the blood work in the liver, but they didn't say anything about the enlargement.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah,
told
these
me,
are, and when we were talking to the RN yesterday who was doing our discharge, she said that there was something that was listed about his liver, but wasn't sure exactly as to how to define it.
So they're describing this thing called hepatic steatosis, which is basically fatty liver. So fat gets deposited in the liver. It's very, very common, particularly in diabetics. That isn't
I think
at
that
this
may have been
point.
what she was
Yeah,
talking about.
that's what I was just reading that report.
I got
It's right here.
371 on my triglycerides.
Yeah, and that likes to go to the liver too, the high cholesterol. So that could be responsible. That is more of a long-term issue. It needs to be addressed to get your cholesterol and your diabetes and all that stuff under control.
My cholesterol level was fine, but the triglycerides
Mm-hmm.
was 371.
And the spleen isn't gigantic. So sometimes I'll meet people and the spleen, I can just feel it just by barely touching someone's abdomen. It's not gigantic. It normally goes up to around 14 centimeters and yours was 17. So it's not a huge spleen, but nonetheless, the pattern seems to be consistent with this CML. So our very first objective is to make the diagnosis. And then what we'll do, so I'm going to send labs today. We're going to get back together probably middle of next week because it's going to take that long because these tests are going to take, they don't get done here. Some of them will get done here, but the most important ones are send out tests. And by the time they get there and they do the test and it gets back, it takes a little while. Okay, so we'll get back together middle of next week. I'll have an answer. I'll know for sure if it's CML. If it's not, then we're going to move forward with the bone marrow biopsy and get that done.
That one gene that I was talking about before with my other cousins.
The BRCA2?
Yeah. Can I get that test done?
Yes, but we're going to have to jump through even more hoops to do that. So we're not going to do it today, but I'm going to try to get that done. We have one of our laboratory workers she sort of specializes in getting these tests approved by the insurance because they're expensive. So we're going to go down this path, but we won't do it today. But we will. I'm going to try to get it done for you. Okay. Great. I think it will help if we have a cancer diagnosis too. So if I know you have CML, it will help me get that test approved. Okay.
Great.
All right.
As of right now, until we meet again next week, I had a few questions as to what he can and can't have as far as pain relief.
Okay. All right. All right.
I've been feeling nausea all the time.
But we've gotten his medication for
thrown up
that,
a lot.
which
Oh yeah, I got that.
is just his headaches that have been
The
killing
headaches
him.
have been, and the Tylenol is not doing anything.
Tylenol's not doing anything. Okay. All right. Well, I think probably I don't want to do this long term because I think if this is CML, we get it under control, your headaches are going to get better.
Yeah.
But I'll send in a little bit of an opioid medicine you can take for right now.
Just short.
Just for short term. I don't, like I said, I don't want to do this long term. But
Right.
if you're miserable with the headaches, then we'll go ahead and do that.
And so far he's been gearing towards a whole foods plant-based diet. Is that a good track to stay on?
I think so. I think that's perfect. Because you've got to take care of yourself. Obviously, you've got a bunch of medical issues going on, and getting your triglycerides under control, and your heart disease, and diabetes, and all this stuff. It's important to do all that.
So
in
lean
addition.
meats and lots of vegetables.
Yeah.
Also,
I've been going to the gym pretty much every day at the Marine base. Just doing 5 minutes of rowing on the elliptical for like 10 minutes, and then some curls and pull down bars. And that's pretty much it.
Is
For
that
like less
something
than
that
30
you can-
minutes of exercise every day. So that's something that.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that. I want to make sure you're drinking plenty of fluids. I do not want you getting dehydrated because dehydrated makes your blood concentrated and those white counts go up even higher.
Oh, okay.
When it's
With
concentrated.
the diabetes, that dehydrates me a
so
lot.
I mean, on
So-
average, I know average is 8 ounce glasses, but what do you think the dads should be around?
I think that's probably fine. Of water,
Of
and
water.
then you can add other liquids to it, but
Right.
try to
Not
get that
alcohol.
much. No.
I don't drink that. I have maybe like 3 cans of beer a week,
Yeah.
which I just started, since I moved here, actually.
He was living the good life for a little bit.
Yeah. Beach life. So, okay.
All right. So I think we got a plan. So if you're falling apart, let's say all kinds of heck's breaking loose and things are happening, I want you to call up here and tell us what's going on. Okay. If you call here, you'll get into a phone tree and you go to the nurse. If the nurse doesn't answer the phone, it just means we've got a senior nurse that does this, so it just means she's on the phone with someone else or she's doing something. They're very diligent. She'll go back and check that machine, so just leave a message on the machine.
Okay. Maybe that wasn't the right number that we called then.
Well, I selected appointments and then existing appointments and left a message that I was going to be 10 minutes late.
Oh, did you?
And she didn't know that.
That person might not be diligently checking the phone. I don't know where
As far as
exactly
the
that
nursing
goes,
team
but
and-
that nurse will answer that. Will answer the calls. I'm sure of that. That's
But
all
I
we
think
do.
they forgive us for being a little late.
Yeah, no, you're fine. It's not a big deal. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I'm just glad you came. I was worried maybe you had gotten sick or something had happened. I didn't know.
Yeah, we had to, I mean, on top of traffic not being great, we had to stop and get him a snack before we got here.
I checked my blood sugar and
Yeah,
it was like
it was
77, and my blood was normally in the 300s. So
But this morning it was
it was a crisis on the way here. I'm sitting there, why am I so weak and shaky and stuff? And Christina mentioned about blood sugar, and I said, oh, I got my blood sugar meter here, and I checked it. So that's what's going on, and it's exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
So we'll leave here and go get something to eat.
Okay. All right. So I'm gonna have you come on out here. I'm gonna bring you out to this little front room. I'm gonna write this down. We'll get your labs. Okay. We'll get all that stuff.
Oh, the
cooking.
lab's done in this office as well.
Yeah, if the lady is still here. Hopefully she is.
Okay.
I haven't taken that class yet, so I can't do it for you.
If
But
she's not here, we'll send you to the outpatient lab, but usually, hopefully she stayed. So
Thank you.
you're very welcome. It was nice to meet you all. And I'm gonna have you come on with me, and we're gonna get to the bottom of this little mystery here.